I love Chris Pratt very much. Welcome back to another episode of the Disney with Kels podcast. I'm your host, Kelsey Conkling. And this week, I want to start my two-part series of my favorite attractions at Walt Disney World, where I will give you the top 3 of my favorites from each of the 4 Walt Disney World parks. This week, I will start with Magic Kingdom and Epcot, and next week, I'll move on to Animal Kingdom and Hollywood Studios. So I'm just going to tell you a little bit about what the attractions are and the history of those attractions and why I love them so much, plus any other information that I think would be helpful for you if you wanted to go experience those attractions for yourselves. And I would like to preface this by saying these are in no particular order because it was hard enough to narrow it down to a top 3 for each park. I am somebody who likes every attraction in their own unique way, and I see the benefit of the attractions, but also the enjoyment of those attractions, again, in their own unique way. So it was hard enough to pick a top 3, so I'm not going to rank those themselves. So to start, I'm going to start with the Magic Kingdom, and the first attraction I have picked is the Tomorrowland Transit Authority People Mover. Now, if you don't know what the Tomorrowland Transit Authority People Mover is, and yes, that is its full name currently, it's a train-style ride is how I like to describe it. Though it's not really a train, it is a ride, but it's not really a train. It is a train in that there are cars linked up together and it takes you on a journey. And this train-style ride of the People Mover takes you through Tomorrowland at the Magic Kingdom on an elevated platform. So when you get on the ride, you go up a moving walkway that's a ramp and you load up on the People Mover track. And from there, it is a level journey throughout Tomorrowland. But you get to see Tomorrowland in a lot of very unique ways. You get to go through what I call secret tunnels. And there are certain little things within those tunnels that you would only get to see on the People Mover, which I think is very neat. You also get to go through some of the attractions. You get to go through Space Mountain and Buzz Lightyear's Space Ranger Spin and see a little glimpse into those attractions from up above, which is very neat as well. So the People Mover has a very cool history, I think. It premiered at the 1964 New York World's Fair, and if you know anything about Disney, you know that the 1964 World's Fair in New York was a monumental event for the Walt Disney Company and Walt Disney Imagineering in general. The People Mover premiered as the WED Way People Mover, and WED stands for Walter Elias Disney. He had WED Enterprises was the original name of the Imagineering department. And so they called it the WED Way People Mover. And it advertised itself as transportation as an attraction. And something really unique about this was the type of transportation that Walt Disney wanted to have in his experimental prototype community of tomorrow, which was Epcot. That was his original vision for Epcot, was to not be a theme park, but to be a living, breathing community that people lived in. Unfortunately, however, we know now that it was not feasible, and that dream kind of died with Walt when he did die. And the People Mover is just so unique because it's constantly moving, and that was one of the things that Walt Disney wanted. He wanted everything constantly in motion, which is very neat and makes a lot of sense. Like, nothing ever stops. After the 1964 World's Fair, Walt wanted to bring the attraction to Disneyland, and he did so in 1967 when the People Mover opened at the Disneyland Resort in California, and then it was presented by Goodyear. And if you don't know, a lot of Disney attractions are originally sponsored by a company so that the Imagineering department could get the funding that they needed to do these attractions that needed funding for technology that they had to invent themselves. So in 1967, it was presented by Goodyear because in that version of the People Mover, they used wheels underneath the train that were Goodyear wheels, like tires, little tires. That is not the case now, and I'll get into that in just a minute. But in 1975, the People Mover came to the Magic Kingdom at Walt Disney World. Now, the People Mover does not exist at Disneyland Resort any longer. However, it does still operate at the Magic Kingdom at Walt Disney World today. So the People Mover has experienced a lot of changes over its lifetime, but the main ones that were the biggest changes were the narration for the ride and the name of the attraction itself. When the People Mover went to Disneyland, it was just called People Mover. It wasn't called Wedway People Mover any longer. And in 1975, when it went to the Magic Kingdom, it was still just called People Mover. However, in 1994, it was renamed to the Tomorrowland Transit Authority. It didn't even have People Mover in its name any longer, though a lot of people still referred to it as that. And so in 2010, it was renamed again to the Tomorrowland Transit Authority People Mover. And some people still shorten it to the TTA. That's what I like to abbreviate it to, but most people just say the People Mover. In the most recent change was in 2022 when the narration was changed to include Tron Light Cycle Run because it was opening very soon, and it is in Tomorrowland along the way. So that's one of the things that you also get to see up on the People Mover. The way that the People Mover works, I think, is pretty cool. I like science and things. Well, I like to learn about it. I'm not super good at it any longer. But the way that the People Mover works now, I think, is pretty neat. It uses linear induction motors to propel the train along the track. And that's just a fancy word for saying that there's electromagnets in the track itself and on the train itself that pulse at like very carefully timed sequences to be able to move the train down the track. And because of that, it's able to speed up and slow down the train at certain points along the journey. So your train will slow down when you go inside one of the buildings and then speed up again when it's outside, which I think is really cool. And it allowed the Imagineers to kind of direct the experience for the patrons, which is really neat. There is no height requirement for the People Mover, so it is safe for pregnant women, infants, all ages can ride the People Mover. In terms of accessibility, the Disney website does say that you need to be ambulatory to be able to experience this attraction. There is no wheelchair accessible ride vehicle, and there's no elevator to get up to the attraction. However, there's no stairs either. There is a moving walkway, but it is ramped pretty steep, I would say, for a ramp. So you would need to be able to get up to that ramp and get on the ride vehicle with a moving walkway because, again, it doesn't stop. I know that other Omnimover attractions, the moving walkways, they're able to slow down the track to help somebody get on who's maybe having a little bit more of a difficult time. So you can definitely ask a cast member if that's something that you think you might benefit from. But in terms of that, the Walt Disney website does say you need to be ambulatory for this ride. So going after all of that, why do I love the People Mover? And I think you could sort of see my passion when I was talking about it. But again, it's just a good way to relax because you can put your feet up if your feet are not gross. You can put your feet up on the seat in front of you because both of the seats face one another. So you also have the option to ride backwards or forwards, which is neat. You get to see Tomorrowland in a very unique way. Again, you get to go into buildings. You get to see Progress City, like a little model of Progress City. That was Walt's original design for Epcot, which is pretty cool to see. The wait time is usually pretty low. The longest I've ever chosen to wait in line for the People Mover was 30 minutes, but I have seen it as long as 45 minutes at very busy times at Walt Disney World. So generally, it is pretty much a walk-on. Those were just very busy times, very busy days that it gets up to about 30 minutes. But the line moves very fast because the ride capacity is a lot and the ride is constantly moving. The only reason why the wait time honestly even gets that high is because they might have to stop the ride for a certain reason. But other than that, it's generally a very low wait time. And going back to seeing Tomorrowland in a very unique way, there is a chance that you can see Space Mountain with the lights on. I have gotten the pleasure to see that one time when Space Mountain had just gone down, and I went on the People Mover and the emergency lights were on in Space Mountain, so I got to see all the tracks and everything. And let me just tell you, do not put your hands up on the Space Mountain attraction, because some of those tracks get really close to one another. So I don't put my hands up anymore after seeing that. Another cool thing about the People Mover is that if it is a slow day and there is really no wait time, you can ask the cast member at the unload zone if you can just stay on and ride again. And I would only ask that if you know that there's hardly a wait, there's not a ton of people in line. And every time that I've asked, they have let me go. But again, if they tell you no, just get off gracefully and move on with your day, and you can just get back in line. But that's a cool thing. I've actually ridden it 3 times in a row just by asking before I got a little bit bored of it. But I love the People Mover, and so that's one of my first attractions that I love. The second attraction I have picked for my favorites for Magic Kingdom is the Carousel of Progress, which is also located in Tomorrowland, just like the People Mover. If you don't know, the Carousel of Progress is a sit-down show that utilizes audio animatronic figures to depict a family as they live life through different periods of time. And those time periods are generally the early 1900s, the 1920s, 1950s, and then the future. And I'm putting that in air quotes because the idea of future has changed a lot since the Carousel of Progress opened a very long time ago. And it's unique because the Carousel of Progress is a rotating theater. So instead of the scenes rotating to you and you be stationary, you are rotating around the scenes at very specific times. So you go in and sit down. There's a little bit of like a pre-show thing while everybody sits down. Not really a pre-show, but there's narration. And then you move with everybody else around in a circle to the next scene. It's very neat. I think it's cool. So a little bit of the history of the Carousel of Progress. It also debuted at the 1964 World's Fair in New York. And it was presented by General Electric at the time. And it was one of the first attractions that debuted the use of the audio animatronic figures, along with great moments with Mr. Lincoln and Walt Disney's Enchanted Tiki Room. So it was one of the original ones that debuted this new technology. The Sherman Brothers wrote the iconic song for the attraction, which is called There's a Great Big Beautiful Tomorrow, one of my favorites. And when it premiered at the New York World's Fair, it was actually called Progress Land. And it reopened at the Disneyland Resort in 1967 and closed in 1973, actually, when General Electric felt that they weren't getting the bang for their buck for sponsoring the ride. So they pulled out of sponsoring the attraction, and that's when it closed its doors in 1973, because they also knew they wanted to move it to Walt Disney World Resort in Florida. So it was an opening day attraction at Disney World in 1975. Sorry, it did open in 1975, but that was not the opening day of Disney World. Disney World opened in 1971. So sorry, back to the show. With some changes, the theater now goes counterclockwise when the original went clockwise. And again, more changes to the last scene of what the future is, again, air quotes, to keep up with the times. And this was also updated in 1981, 1993, 2016, and most recently in 2022 when they just updated the characters' clothing. In terms of accessibility for this ride, there is no height requirement, and they also are able to accommodate wheelchairs and ACVs, and you don't even have to get out of those. They have dedicated spots up at the front of the theater for wheelchairs and ACVs and companion chairs as well. So everyone can enjoy the Carousel of Progress. I will say, however, that if you have a child that you know has a difficult time sitting still for 20 minutes, because that's how long the show is, you might want to wait until they're older, or maybe just skip this attraction, because if anyone gets out of their seat during the show, they have to stop the ride and you have to do that scene over again. They take this very seriously. So just something to keep in mind. And they do warn you at the beginning that if you can't stay for 20 minutes, then you can exit, and they give you an out there. But just wanted to put that out there. But it is very accessible in terms of that. Additionally, I just wanted to say about the seats. They are classic theater style seats with armrests. So if you are somebody who has a more difficult time with seats that have armrests, you might just want to test it out. There's usually no wait for the Carousel of Progress. You might just have to wait for one scene to go through. But you can definitely try it out and then exit if you are uncomfortable. But again, it is 20 minutes long, so just something to keep in mind. Personally, for me, the chairs are a little bit snug, but not too bad. And I could honestly ride it all day, so if that helps you at all. But in the general sense, it is a very accessible attraction. So why do I love Carousel of Progress? Why do I love something that is just a theater show? Well, first of all, I love the song. I think it is so catchy, and it's just a fun little song, and I'm glad that they've kept it around for so long because the Sherman brothers wrote it and they are iconic. It's also air conditioned, and when you are in Florida in the hot summer sun or just hot Florida in general, it is so nice to get a break where you get to sit down and enjoy something in the air conditioning for 20 minutes. And they just recently put new seats in, so it's fresh and clean now. We love that. And I really just love the attractions that Walt Disney worked on himself. It's so iconic because, again, it was one of those first attractions that used audio animatronic figures, and Walt Disney wanted to show people that each time period had progress in it in terms of inventions and things that were so helpful for us that we might take for granted. And that's what I really like about the Carousel of Progress, is that it shows us that we need to be grateful for what we have, because it's always better than what we had before in terms of technology. So in one of the scenes, they just got electric lights, and he says, electric lights, no more kerosene, no more gas. Like, that's awesome. So today, that's what we do. We use electric lights. It's just a switch. So things to be thankful for sure. And the last attraction at Magic Kingdom that I picked for my favorites is also in Tomorrowland, and it is Tron Light Cycle Run. Tron Light Cycle Run opened in 2016 in Shanghai Disneyland, and there it's called Tron Light Cycle Power Run. And in 2023, when it opened in Tomorrowland at the Magic Kingdom, it is called Tron Light Cycle / Run. It's like a forward slash, but when it's said out loud, it's just Tron Light Cycle Run, and usually people shorten it to just Tron. It's based off the Tron Legacy franchise, and the ride takes you on a ride through the grid on Team Blue. You're part of Team Blue, and you ride a light cycle through the grid. The light cycle ride vehicles are very unique because they're imagineered to make you feel like you are riding a light cycle from the movie. And you are lying on your stomach with your legs and your back locked in, and you have handlebars to hold on to. So it's like you're on like a fancy motorbike is how I describe it. Now, personally, I ride the accessible seat that's located in the back of the train. Not every train has it, so you might have to wait a minute. But for me, my belly's a little bit bigger and my legs are a little bit bigger, so I had a hard time locking in the vehicle. So good thing is they have an accessible seat in the back that is just a normal lap bar. And honestly, it was thrilling enough for me in there. So someday I will be able to hopefully ride the normal ride vehicle. But if that is a concern for you, just know that there is an accessible seat in the back that is just a normal lap bar. And that has been so helpful. There's test seats located at the entrance of the ride that you can test to see if it will lock for you, so that you can tell the cast member at loading that you need the accessible seat and don't have to like struggle with it. So I think that's really nice that they do that. So what is Tron Light Cycle Run? It is a fast-paced roller coaster that takes you both inside and outside of the ride building, and it reaches speeds of up to 60 miles per hour, over 60 miles per hour actually. And it has a launch start, which I think is really fun, and that my breath was just taken away the first time I rode it because I didn't realize how fast it was. It was so awesome. It is a rather short ride compared to other Disney World roller coasters. It's a little over a minute long. Some people argue like, well, do you count the very, very beginning of the ride? That's like 5 seconds. So it's generally between 60 and 65 seconds. So very short ride, but very thrilling. And for this attraction, there is a height requirement of 48 inches, which is on the higher side. So it's just 4 feet tall. And you put your stuff in a locker for this ride before you get even to the last little bit of the attraction, like before you get on. You have to put your stuff in a locker, and you can get in and out of those lockers using your magic band or a little card that a cast member can give you when you get there. And I will say, if I can give any piece of advice, don't risk taking your phone or a camera or anything like that. Just take the card they give you or bring your magic band. Like, leave everything in there. There have been so many stories of people losing their phones, but even like their phones breaking inside the little box that they do have on the ride vehicle because it just gets banged around in there. So I would just leave everything in there. They're going to take a ride picture. You don't need your phone. You'll be okay for 5 to 10 minutes, I promise. So why do I love Tron Light Cycle Run? Well, first of all, I just love roller coasters. I think roller coasters are super fun. And it is very fast. And I love that they have put in more rides for us thrill seekers that are just more intense than some of the more mild roller coasters. Because honestly, even Space Mountain to me is pretty mild when compared to Tron or Rock and Roller Coaster or Guardians of the Galaxy. And because I sit in the accessible seat in the back of the train, I think that is the best seat in the house on roller coasters because you don't have to wait for the rest of the train to catch up to you. It's just fast because you're being pulled by the other cars. So that's why I like it, because it's really fast. I also love the theming. I love the pre-show and the first staging area. And without giving any spoilers, I was not expecting it the first time I rode it. I try to stay away from spoilers as much as I can for rides. And yeah, I wasn't expecting what happened, and it was just really cool. So if you are someone who likes watching ride POVs, there's plenty out on YouTube, but I would encourage you to just wait until you get to ride it because I think it's really cool. And the graphics inside the ride are so clear because they're brand new. They're so clear and they're really neat, and I felt really immersed when I was on this ride. So those are my top 3 favorite attractions at Magic Kingdom. And now it's time for Joke of the Week. I thought it would be fun to insert this little segment in the middle of the show just to break it up a little. So this is Kelsey's Disney Joke of the Week. And this joke is my go-to whenever somebody asks me if I have a joke. This is what I say. Why did Anna and Elsa never learn the alphabet? I'll let you think about it for a second. Why did Anna and Elsa never learn the alphabet? Well, it's because their parents got lost at sea. It's a little dark, but that's sorry. I just love that joke, and sometimes it takes people a second to get it. But anyway, that was Kelsey's Disney Joke of the Week. Thanks so much. Now moving on to Epcot. There are a lot less attractions at Epcot than at Magic Kingdom, so it was a little easier for me to narrow down to my top 3. But I will preface this also by saying I have an unpopular opinion about my favorite attractions at Epcot. Okay? So the first one that is one of my absolute favorites, maybe one of my favorites in the whole of Walt Disney World, is Mission Space, and specifically Mission Space Orange Team. And I can just hear it now. A lot of you I know don't like Mission Space, but it is one of my favorites, and I will tell you why in a little bit. But just to give you a little bit of history and background, Mission Space opened in 2003, and it took the place of the attraction Horizons, which had closed permanently in 1999. I believe Horizons was one of the opening day attractions for Epcot. However, I could be wrong about that. I did not look that up. I should have. But Horizons closed in 1999, and Mission Space took its place 4 years later. And when it opened, it was sponsored by HP and NASA. It was updated most recently in 2017 with a new pre-show when the green team was changed from a mission to Mars to a mission of Earth. And now that's what it is. Green team is the Earth mission and orange team is the Mars mission. And what Mission Space is it's a space flight simulator, where you are on a team of 4 and you're each given a sort of job to do on your mission to either around Earth, like orbiting Earth, or your mission to Mars. And those are pilot, navigator, engineer, and commander. And during the ride, you each have little roles to play. You have certain buttons to push at certain times, and they make it really easy, and they light up when you're supposed to press them. So it's really cool. And you each have a joystick at your station to fly the plane, air quotes, fly the plane. And Mission Space is comprised of 2 different missions that you can pick from, or teams. There's the green team or the orange team. The green team is a less intense version of the attraction where you are taken on a space flight around Earth. And orange team is the more intense version of the attraction where you are taken on a space flight all the way to Mars. And on the orange team, more intense version, you experience forces up to 2.5 Gs, which is about 2.5 times the forces of gravity on Earth. And the way that this works is spinning. So there are 10 capsules that are attached to a central base, and they are all spun around in a circle so that you get that centrifugal force where you feel like you're taking off in a spaceship. And it's the same sort of simulation that the astronauts use when they are training to be astronauts. However, a much milder version of that. And I will say there are many, many, many safety warnings at multiple points during the ride queue. So if you are prone to motion sickness of any kind in any way, shape, or form, you should not ride. They tell you this multiple times, but I'm going to tell you this here too. Don't ride. There are motion sickness bags in the ride vehicle as well, if that tells you anything. The green team is less intense for sure, and there's not spinning really. You're kind of just in the simulator and it rocks back and forth and forward and backward. But my cousin went on it and she still felt a little bit queasy after that. So again, use your own judgment. Green team is a lot less intense. You don't feel G-forces, but you are still in a simulator and in an enclosed dark space. So if that's something that makes you uncomfortable, maybe just skip out on this one. In terms of height requirement, the green team has a height requirement of 40 inches and the orange team is 44 inches. In terms of accessibility, the Disney website does say that you must transfer from your wheelchair or ECV into the ride vehicle itself. And the ride seat itself is surrounded on 2 sides by these small walls that separate each person. And you're locked in with a pull down shoulder restraint. And then the front panel of the simulator itself comes forward so that you can reach your buttons and the screen is kind of very close to your face. I've never had an issue about fitting on the ride. However, if that is something that makes you nervous, you can always ask to speak to a cast member and they would be able to help you more about what might be comfortable, more comfortable, less comfortable if you just skip the ride. They don't have a test seat that I know of, but I'm sure if you ask a cast member, they could help you out with that if you're nervous. There is an air-conditioned play area at the exit of the ride that you can utilize if you are waiting for somebody or if your kids just want to play. And that's a good hack to know just for Epcot in general, that there is a play structure in there where they can be mission control, and also just there's a indoor play area. It's air conditioned. If I didn't say that before, it's air conditioned. It's good. So why do I love Mission Space when a whole bunch of people hate it? I love the feeling of the G-forces. I think it is such a cool feeling, and you feel like your face is just being pulled back, and I love it. And I don't get motion sick very easily at all. The only time that I felt a little bit queasy after riding it, I had eaten like 2 dessert plates from some festival that Epcot was having, and I went on Mission Space literally right after that. So maybe don't do that. Let your stomach settle a little bit before going, or just don't go at all. A lot of people, they just skip it entirely. They rode it once and never again, and some people I know don't ride it ever and won't. But I love it. I just love it. And it's so cool. Like I mentioned before, that each person like has a job to do. So it really does feel like you are operating the vehicle when, even if you are in there by yourself, which has happened to me several times, especially during COVID, they were putting each party in their own capsule. So I was the only one there. Even if no one presses the buttons, the mission still goes the way it goes. And the queue itself has some actual artifacts from NASA, which is really neat. And I personally love learning about space and astronauts and just, the final frontier. And I actually went to the U.S. Space and Rocket Center last summer when I went on my 2-week-long road trip by myself and got to see a lot of those things. And y'all, it was so cool. I want to go back there. But for now, I'll just ride Mission Space whenever I go to Florida or just dream about it. So that's why I love Mission Space. And the next attraction that I have picked is right next door to Mission Space, and it is Guardians of the Galaxy Cosmic Rewind. This is the first attraction at Walt Disney World to be based on a Marvel movie and the Marvel comics in general. And there is reasons for that. There's some sort of contract thing with the east and the west of the Mississippi where Marvel can't be in the theme parks east of the Mississippi, but I don't know all the ins and outs of that. But I know that Guardians of the Galaxy Cosmic Rewind is the first attraction of Marvel at Walt Disney World. And this ride replaced the Universe of Energy attraction that was at Epcot that contained Ellen's Energy Adventure. And yes, it's talk show host Ellen, and there was dinosaurs in it. It was a trip. If you want to look that up on YouTube, if you don't know what I'm talking about. It was like a 45-minute long attraction, but it was neat. I liked it. But that closed in 2017. And while Guardians of the Galaxy was originally set to open in 2021, it didn't actually end up opening until May of 2022 because, COVID just slows everything down and everything like that. So it is one of the world's longest enclosed roller coasters, which is really neat. So it's entirely inside. And the premise of the ride is that you are about to visit Xandar when a celestial monster type thing who's known as the Searcher interrupts your tour, stealing the cosmic generator that is meant to give you a hyper jump to Xandar. And he, big monster guy, is going to use that to turn back time to the very beginning of time and basically destroy every living thing in humanity. So that's exciting. But then Rocket comes up with a plan to take you through the jump points to catch this guy through time and get the cosmic generator back. So like I said before, the attraction is fully indoors. It's a roller coaster, if I didn't say that before. It spins. And I don't mean it spins all willy-nilly, but each car of the coaster train is specifically programmed to turn at different points along the ride. So you get a very specific ride experience. So at certain points, you're facing forward, some facing backwards, some you're facing sideways or turning as you're going through the roller coaster tracks. And at the same time, you are listening to a song. There are 6 different songs that play on Guardians of the Galaxy Cosmic Rewind, and it's random. However, I will say, I got Disco Inferno 3 rides in a row, and I am sick of that song, and I never want to hear it again, ever. Not just at Disney World, but just in my normal life. And the ride is currently still operating on a virtual queue and lightning lane only basis. So for virtual queue, what you do is if you have a reservation for Epcot at 7 a.m. on that day, you can join the virtual queue on your My Disney Experience app, and it'll give you a boarding group number that is basically a return time to come later in the day. If you purchase the lightning lane for it, you just get to skip the entire line at the time allotted. So you can't just walk up and stand in the line, unfortunately, at this time, but you do need to utilize virtual queue or the lightning lane. The height requirements for Guardians of the Galaxy is 42 inches. In terms of accessibility, you do have to transfer from your wheelchair or ECV. And the ride vehicles are pretty spacious, in my opinion. It is a large lap bar with handles. It's not over the shoulder. It's just a lap bar, but there's handles to hold on to. And it felt roomy for me, but of course you can always ask a cast member for assistance if you're worried about like fitting comfortably on the ride or just being comfortable on the ride in general. And why do I love Guardians of the Galaxy? Well, for one, I just love Guardians of the Galaxy and I love Chris Pratt very much. They are my favorite Marvel superheroes at the moment. And admission time, I still have not watched the third Guardians of the Galaxy movie for a second time. I've watched it the first time. I have not rewatched it because it just wrecked me. It wrecked my emotions and I just haven't brought myself to be able to rewatch it again. But I really do love Guardians of the Galaxy and all the movies and that they have themselves and in the Avengers and all the things. And the coaster itself is really unique. Just in terms of the ride experience. So you're not just facing forward the whole time. You're facing sideways and backwards and you're moving and getting like these weird forces because you're facing a different way that I just think is really unique and cool. And then the music on the ride is fun. It's fun to see what music you do get because it doesn't start until like 30 to 45 seconds into the ride when something big happens. Again, don't want to do spoilers, but you know, I just love it because it's thrilling, it's Chris Pratt, and it's air conditioned the whole time. The ride, queue, and the attraction itself are all inside and air conditioned. So that is lovely. And the last attraction for this episode at Epcot is Living with the Land. And I know a lot of you are like, wait, maybe Soarin', Figment, Remy. No, it's Living with the Land. If I had to narrow it down to a top 3, this is in that category. So Living with the Land originally opened in 1982 and it was called Listen to the Land. And it also included like a little song, like musical number called Symphony of the Seed, which I need to go re-look up a video on YouTube of that because I think it was really fun. And in this version, the cast members were actually the ones narrating the second half of the ride. So you go through the first half of the ride, and then once you get to the greenhouse, as a cast member, kind of like a jungle skipper, was narrating the rest of the ride. And in 1993, Listen to the Land closes and reopens just later that year as Living with the Land. But it wasn't until 2006 that the cast members were no longer the ones narrating the second half of the ride. It was an automated audio that was embedded into the ride vehicles and triggered by RFID tags in the track, which is really cool. And it has experienced several changes over the years, but it's stayed rather consistent since 2009. There hasn't been any like crazy major changes or anything since then. And if you're wondering, like, what is Living with the Land? I don't even know what you're talking about. It's a gentle and relaxing boat ride through the greenhouses of the Land Pavilion at Epcot. And it really is so relaxing. There's some animatronics at the beginning that kind of set the scene, but then you get to go through the greenhouses and the fish hatchery to see a whole bunch of like what they're growing. And the Land Pavilion, the land greenhouses actually provide a lot of produce and fish for the restaurants at Disney World, which I think is really cool. The ride focuses on conservation and sustainability practices. So as well as being entertained, you are being educated, which is also very fun. In terms of accessibility for Living with the Land, there is no height requirement. So it is safe for pregnant women, infants, all ages. There is a step down into the ride vehicle. However, if you utilize a wheelchair or ECV, you are able to pull a wheelchair directly onto an accessible ride vehicle. However, it does not accommodate ECVs according to the research that I've done. You do need to transfer to a manual wheelchair, but they do have them at the loading area of the ride. So if you need to do that, you can, and you can stay in your wheelchair throughout the entire attraction, which is really neat. Another cool thing about Living with the Land is that there is a tour that you can take called Behind the Seeds. And it is $39 per person plus tax. If you are Disney Vacation Club, you do get a little bit of a discount. And I think it's like $35. So it's not a big discount, but still a discount, where you get to go behind the scenes of the greenhouses at the Land Pavilion. I went on this tour a couple years ago and it was so neat. We got to taste some things, we got to touch some plants, and we got to really just go behind the scenes of the greenhouses, and the Living with the Land ride vehicles were just strolling on past as we were doing our tour, which was so neat. So if you have the opportunity to do that, I think you definitely should. It's very worth it. In terms of tours at Disney World, it's very cheap, and you can make reservations in advance. They do often have tours available for walk-up. However, if you really want to do it, just make a reservation so that you know you get to do it. So why do I love Living with the Land so much? Well, for one, it's just relaxing. Again, any opportunity I can get to get off my feet at Disney World, I will take it. And the greenhouses grow different things at different times of year. So the ride is honestly changing a lot. And when I was on the tour, our guide told us that sometimes they just want to grow a certain plant. And so they ask for permission from the powers that be, and they usually get to. And so there's different plants to see. And then during the different holiday seasons, there's like little setups that they do. So different things to see at Christmas at night. It's so pretty because they put up a bunch of Christmas lights, and it's dark in the greenhouses, so you can see a lot of the lights. There's also a lot of hidden Mickeys everywhere on Living with the Land, and I don't think I've seen all of them. Some of them I've seen myself, just not knowing that they were there in the first place. And some are like obvious Mickeys, but that's a fun game to play too, is seeing how many Mickeys you can find. So that is it. Those are my top 3 favorite attractions at Magic Kingdom and Epcot. And again, they're in no particular order, and I do love every attraction at Walt Disney World in their own right, in their own way, because they all are amazing, and there's just so much entertainment and just quality attractions at Walt Disney World. So next week, I will go into Animal Kingdom and Hollywood Studios, my favorite attractions at those parks. But for now, thank you so much for listening. Please make sure to subscribe to my channel so you never miss another episode. Please like the video and share it to your friends if you enjoyed it. And please let me know in the comments if there's anything else you want me to cover. Thank you so much for listening to another episode of the Disney with Kels podcast. I'm Kelsey Conkling, and I hope you have a great, big, beautiful tomorrow.